Let's make a start. So today we are kind of in the part 2 session of application lifecycle management with SharePoint 2010. We're going to do a bit of a recap on feature upgrade, which is one of the main topics from yesterday. For the people, hands up who was in the part 1 session yesterday. Wow, okay, most. Okay, so it's maybe going to be a little bit of a pain to go through that demo again, but this is your chance to lock in that information so that when you come back and do some feature upgrade stuff down the line, you don't have to spend an hour or two reading up on it. So use this as your opportunity to kind of, at least for this topic, cement the information. And then for the people that weren't here yesterday, this is one of the key things that is new in SharePoint 2010, the ability to upgrade features. So all those things about me are still the same. Nothing's changed since yesterday. I'm still the same Chris O'Brien. And if we think about what we did look at last time, so we looked at some changes in the feature framework. If you missed the session, then there's probably some good information in there that you might want to look at. And we looked at using a new technique for arriving at feature XML. We looked at this new process that we can do of building a site in the browser and SharePoint Designer, and then saving it as a site template. Because that now gives us a WSP, rather than a crappy STP that we couldn't really do a lot with, we can import it into Visual Studio 2010 and get lots of XML for fields, content types, list definitions, and so on in a very quick and easy way that, no matter how good a SharePoint developer we are, I think is a useful technique. We also looked then at feature upgrade and how to version features. We started to look at the two approaches there of using code to upgrade features and also using XML. So this is part of what we're going to recap today. I'm going to try and go through that fairly quickly, though, so it's going to be quite fast-paced again. But the other things that we're looking at today is, okay, so if we understand more about the features framework and using it as a vehicle to deploy functionality in SharePoint in terms of upgrade, if we think about all the different types of artifacts, think about fields, content types, list definitions, site definitions, how do we upgrade each of those? How does SharePoint treat them internally? So that if a client is asking us to make some changes to their solution that is already in use, how do we know what to do with the features framework? Going beyond that, we'll start to look at changes in WSPs, what Microsoft have changed in this release that is specific to the solution framework. And we'll talk about assembly versioning. Yesterday, we tested out my theory that 90% of the world's SharePoint 2007 deployments are still all at version 1000 for all their assemblies. I think the room was kind of broadly in agreement with that. You know, when we did a hands up, there weren't many people that put their hands up. And one thing we didn't talk about is that if you are in that situation, you're actually in good company. So I do some work with the patterns and practices team within Microsoft. They were recommending that you didn't version assemblies in 2007. That's how bad the story was. So we'll look at what 2010 does to solve that, and it kind of brings good lifecycle management practices to SharePoint 2010. Right at the end, we're going to wrap up with some recommendations for the different types of versioning we can do now. So we'll look at recommendations for versioning features, and we'll look at recommendations for versioning assemblies, now that it's more easy to do that. So, quick recap. Only 2 slides of feature upgrade recap, and then we're just going to launch into that demo, and we'll go through that pretty quickly. So, main thing we said is that the version attribute now has a purpose. It was always there before, it didn't do anything. Now it's central to feature upgrade, and it's incrementing that version number, which is important to triggering upgrade. And we've got this new node, upgrade actions. This is where we put the instructions for what we are upgrading in this upgrade iteration. Within there, we've got some new XML, and we'll look at those. But when the XML doesn't really fit what we're trying to do, because there's only a handful of elements, then we've got an opportunity to shell out to C# code, and then we can do whatever we want. Whatever we can write the C# code for, we can run in our upgrade. The place where that code lives is the new feature upgrading event. So that's going to be the difference between your feature receivers in 2007 to 2010, this new method on the receiver class. Okay, so those new XML elements that you can use for upgrade, so this is all within the feature XML file. We've got apply element manifests, which we said we can add a new elements file to an existing feature. We can declare it with that element, and then on this upgrade, it will provision everything in that elements file. sometimes very powerful. And we talked about some scenarios where that might be all you need to do in upgrading a feature. You're just provisioning some new elements, so all you've got to do is say, hey, SharePoint, I've added stuff into this feature. You take notice of that and process it on this upgrade. We looked at add content type field and how Microsoft have provided us with a shortcut to something which is a really common action. We're going to be doing this all the time. It's one of the most common things that you might come across when you're upgrading features. So Microsoft said, hey, you shouldn't be writing code for that. We'll just give you an XML element. And we looked at map file, the mystery element that I just cannot get working. And this is really about changing a database pointer for a customized file from something in location A in the SharePoint route to location B. I didn't have anybody come up to me afterwards and say, yeah, I've got that working. So until MS kind of provide further documentation on it, it's a bit kind of, there's some scenarios that we don't know how it will work in. Okay, so that's it for slides. Let's quickly run through that demo again. Okay, so this is my publishing site that I'm using to as a test bed for lots of things, basically, for the book, for talks like this. And really, I just thought that when we're testing upgrade scenarios, wouldn't you prefer to see it in something that's a bit more realistic rather than an out-of-the-box publishing site? We've got lots of stuff behind this. We've got lots of content types. It's almost quite a mature site in a way. It is way more reflective of the kind of stuff that you guys will be upgrading. So this is the AdventureWorks sample that was done for 2007. I've upgraded it to 2010. And the bit that we were interested in was this tourist activities list down here at the bottom, which is some fairly simple functionality. All it does is there's a list in the background that's got some items in. The list is bound to a content type, and the content type has a couple of fields. So that's all been provisioned with a couple of features. In our upgrade scenario, what we did is we dealt with the business case of the client saying to us, okay, so we're using that, we are adding activities into the various destination webs in our site. What we need is some new fields, so we showed using the feature upgrade framework to add those. So if we run through those quickly again for the benefit of people that weren't here, what we did is we said, okay, so if they need some new fields, so what they said to us is, we're going to need a new field for the type of activity and a new field to say whether it's free. So the type of activity is a choice field, and the free field is just a yes, no, a Boolean field. So we defined those fields. We went into our project, and we know that this functionality is defined in two features within the AdventureWorks.CustomList project. There is a site feature, and we have to always remember about the elements by scope rules. So fields and content types are scoped to SP site, and things like list definitions and list instances, they're at web scope. So we need different features sometimes when we're deploying functionality and features. So what we'll do is we'll run through that again. We will quickly add some fields and get those provisioned in our feature. Call this new elements file tourist activity fields iteration 2. And I'm going to drop in the XML that we would use to provision those fields. Okay, so that's the XML that we should recognize. There are a couple of changes actually in schema kind of going from 2007 to 2010. Things like field ref elements, it seems that you used to declare the ID and the name whenever you kind of reference those in a content type. One interesting change that we seem to be seeing is that you now have to declare the display name as well. So there are a couple of changes in, kind of obscure feature elements that you need to look out for. And that goes back to what we were saying about WSP import yesterday, that you cannot import 2007 WSPs. And one of the things that you run into is little schema differences here and there that you can't easily pick out. And we're finding that there's quite a few examples as you do a lot of deep down feature stuff. Okay, so we added that elements file. What we're going to do is make sure that it went into the right feature. We talked about how Visual Studio doesn't always put things in the right feature. And there we see that it's actually ended up in my web feature, but fields are site scoped, so that's not going to work. So I'm dragging it in Packaging Explorer over to the site scope feature. So that would provision the fields, so long as we go and do the next bit, which is to edit the site feature itself, and then say, hey, we've added a new elements file, we want you to provision it on this upgrade. So, switching from the designer to the manifest, remember there is no designer support for feature upgrade. We have to do the XML editing ourselves. We can do it in the bottom pane because that's going to merge our XML changes into the file that Visual Studio is managing in the top pane. Better idea is to use the XML editor. That will still work in the same way. First thing to do, of course, is add the version attribute if it isn't there already. When it isn't there, all your features that you might bring in from 2007, they're defaulting to 0000. By putting it to 1000, we are incrementing the feature version. Here's where we use our new upgrade actions node, and we specify the version range for the actions that we're about to declare, what these apply to. So I'm going to say that anything that's between 0000 and 0999, so anything between what I'm up until what I'm going to here, what I'm going to do is do an apply elements manifest, and I'm going to do an add content type field for those two fields that we've just provisioned. So that's a fair amount of XML, so here's where I drop to a snippet. Yeah.
Quick question. Did you say yesterday that the begin version includes the end version?
I did, yeah. Yeah. So that's one of the gotchas that, and it kind of makes sense because if they were both inclusive, I think you'd potentially get a mismatch somewhere.
Does that mean on that end version you want 1.0.0?
No, I don't think so. I mean, in actual fact, don't forget that all my feature instances out there in the wild are all at 0000. So it's probably, I'm saying that what you'll see, don't forget, in the next iteration is that we do a version range that starts from 1000 to 1999, and it's that one that captures the instances that are 1000, because begin version is inclusive and end version isn't.
So if you had put the version on 0.999,
If I had something out there at 0999, then I would do the next iteration, and the begin version would start at 0999. Does that make sense? Yeah. I spent quite a lot of time bottoming out that begin version was inclusive and end version wasn't, because for a while I was trying to work out why. I think I had an end version of what my current feature instances out there in the wild were at, and the upgrade wasn't happening, and that's what I traced it down to. Okay, so we defined our fields in that XML file. Here's where we've got our new upgrade nodes where we reference the new elements file in an apply element manifest, and we have add content type fields for the two ones that we've added. So these were going to get added to our tourist activity content type, and we've got this push down of true, which means that they're going to get pushed down to the list instances throughout my site collection. I know that I've got 4 or 5 list instances throughout my site collection. So here I'm changing Visual Studio to say, when you deploy, I just want you to upgrade. So the same as STS ADM upgrade. And that's fine for feature upgrade. That's typically what you do. So that's deploying the WSP out to my just one WFP, in this case, my dev WFE. And here's where I did the the kind of trick question yesterday where we said, okay, what are we expecting to change at this point? And I think a few people put the hand up and we got an answer to say, okay, well, we would expect our content type to have those new fields. Of course you would. That is completely logical. But we didn't see that. And the answer is because feature upgrade is not something that happens automatically. This is the key thing that you need to remember, and that is tripping everybody up in the forums that is trying to look at feature upgrade. You kind of think that it would just happen, but of course it doesn't. You have to trigger it yourself, And it makes sense, right? Because if you've got a big farm, you've got 1,000 site collections, and each site collection has 1,000 webs, would you really want to just roll that out, or, you know, to every web and every instance? Well, you might not. And if you've got that control, then you can kind of roll out functionality and roll out upgrades in a piecemeal way. So, this is what we said. There is no, I'll say it again the same way because it's important. There is no UI onto feature upgrade. There is no STSADM command. There is no PowerShell commandlet. There is very little. So all we've got is spfeature.upgrade.
What about sandbox solutions?
We're coming on sandbox solutions later. Sandbox solutions, things work slightly differently. Perhaps not in the way that you might hope as well. But good question. Okay, so that's recycling my app pool. We know that that's going to load and no changes are going to take effect in our field because we haven't done anything to trigger the feature upgrade yet. So we looked at my custom app page, which helps us out in this scenario. It's going to take a minute. The other reason that I'm running through this demo again, by the way, is that for those of you that were here yesterday, you may remember that in the second iteration, the VM froze. Now, I think collectively, we need to teach this VM a lesson, okay? So I'm not having that this demo didn't complete. So that's the other reason I want to run through it again. Okay, so no new fields in our content type. What we need to do is go to my patented feature upgrade page, which allows you to run a method in the API called query features, which will then go and look throughout your farm, throughout your site collection in this case, to find features that do need upgrade, and it is just using the version numbers that you've incremented. So it sees that this one needs upgrade. I've got one item, it's a site scope feature, and that's what we're expecting. So we'll hit the upgrade features button. That upgraded successfully. Now we go back to our content type. And we've got the new fields, so feature upgrade has triggered now, and let's see that they got pushed down. It's that push down element on the add content type field, which is very similar to kind of what we've got with the existing push down element that is key to pushing it out throughout your farm. If you don't set that to true, then all you would get is a site content type, and all your list content types will not update. Okay, so happy days. Now, we're going to use this kind of in the third demo, which none of you have seen yet, so I'm just going to add some data into these list items. Okay, fine. So that is one iteration of feature upgrade, remember, and all we've done there is the XML route. So in this particular thing, this business case that we had to upgrade, pretty easy really. The XML elements that are provided to us do all the work. All we used was apply element manifests and add content type field. Now, I think that in the vast permutation of upgrade scenarios that you might run into, so if you've developed SharePoint 2010 solutions and you've got something out there, I'd love to know what proportion it will break down into as to what you can use the XML elements for and what you end up having to write code for. Difficult to say, but I think that the majority of the cases you'll probably have to write code. So that's what we look at in the second iteration. So the iteration that we look at now is the more complex case where the users are saying, okay, thanks for those new fields, we're using them, that's really good. What we notice as we're using this functionality is that the description field is too small. So we need something bigger. And we went to look at that as developers and we saw that it's a single line of text. And really you can see that they need a note field effectively. So we look at the process of upgrading that field, which is changing the type on the fly. And we talked about this in the pub last night, but I still think that the only way to do this is to provision a brand new field, which is a note field, and then we'll mark the old field as hidden, but before that we'll run code that iterates through every web, every list of this type, and then copies the value out of the old field into the new. Blatantly, we require quite a lot of code to do that. There's no XML in the world that's going to do all that for you. So let's quickly run through that demo. So, first thing to do, provision the new field. So far, so the same as last time. So, tourist activity fields, iteration 3 this time. And you can start to see that when you get into feature upgrade, you're going to need to start thinking about naming conventions for some of this. You know, maybe you name things on iteration, if you're doing agile, or maybe you name things on what the functionality is related to. But it would be good, I think, to come up with some conventions that try and reflect kind of where the functionality got added and why, without having to wade through all your upgrade XML. So that's one thing to think about. Not sure that anybody's really got any good conventions on this stuff yet. Okay, so here's where we're provisioning our new note field. What we'll do is flick back into Packaging Explorer. That's gone into the web scope feature again, so we drop it into the site scope feature. And then flick back to the site content, the site feature, and we do a new version range because we're incrementing the version here. So that's the first thing we do. Remember, very important, increment the version number. And then we do the version range for this upgrade iteration. Okay, now we need to do exactly what we did last time. We need an apply element manifest and an add content type field. So we'll drop those in. Okay, so that's what we did, and that's just the same as the first iteration so far. Now we've got to do the complex bit of running the code, which is iterating through the list items and so on. Remember that this is over in the web scope feature, and that's because the list instance is web scoped. We've got many of them. I've got 4 or 5 of them in my site collection. So when this web feature gets upgraded, it will be able to look in the current web, its parent effectively, and then find the list in order to do the processing. So we upgrade this feature at the same time. Set the version to 100. This is what we talk about at the end, by the way, about what to set these numbers to. Upgrade actions, do the version range and say that this is for anything between 0 and 9999. And this is where we're doing the new thing. This is where we're using the final XML element, aside from map file. We're using custom upgrade action, which is where this is what allows us to shell out to the code. So what we did is we said, we'll give this a name, which is migrate to large description field. And then what we do in here is we can optionally assign some parameters. Now, I can't remember all the parameter names, so I'm just going to drop in a snippet. And remember, XML comments, although they might help you in demos like that, they cause feature upgrade to bomb. So remember that you have to take them out. Okay, so that's the XML. We haven't got any code yet, so here's where we add the event receiver. This feature doesn't yet have one. Down at the bottom is our new method for feature upgrading. This is what your 2007 features don't have. And what we would do in here is write the code which will find the list, iterate the list items, and copy the value from the old field to the new. Okay, so we spent a bit more time walking through this yesterday. But I don't think we need to do that again. Really, that's just the code that you would write to deal with that scenario. All it's doing is doing the iteration, copying the value, marking the old field as hidden. Now, the key thing, of course, is that we're testing the upgrade name that gets passed from the XML. And we said a switch statement here is probably going to be more of a valid choice because we're going to stack code up in here over time. You know, I can see that when we've got SharePoint 2010 code that's 3 years old, we'll have done many iterations of upgrading features. So we'll have code stacked up in here. I think what we're going to get to is a place where the implementation isn't in this method. We're going to be designing class hierarchies, which is really a kind of our upgrade management classes, all this does is call out to them. Maybe that would allow us to unit test our upgrades a bit better. For now, we're just going to put the implementation here in this method, but I can see going forward that we're probably going to design better patterns for that. Okay, so I collect the parameters, remember. You know, it's kind of an interesting one about what that gives us. It kind of means that I don't have to hard code them in the C#, but they are in the feature file, which is getting packaged in the WSP. So it's kind of only marginally less hard coded, but you know, maybe there is some advantage there. It kind of depends what you're doing. Okay, so we've incremented 2 feature versions. We've made the changes to both the site and the web feature. We'll push that package out. So that succeeded. And I just want to press F5 quickly to get the app pool spinning up. Now again, we haven't triggered feature upgrade yet. Nothing's going to have happened. We'll go to our page and then don't forget what we need to do here. We need to trigger feature upgrade for the site feature first, because that's going to provision the field. And then we go and find the web features. And that should find many, because we've got several webs which have this feature activated. And then we upgrade those. I think if you were to upgrade web features before the site features got upgraded, well, you run into problems because there's an artifact that hasn't been provisioned at that point. Okay, so app pool spinning up. Interestingly, I tried the few tricks that you can do to try and reduce the app pool spin up time, like the certificate revocation list. Can't seem to get that to take any effect in 2010, so I hope that's something I'm doing wrong. I would hate that all our SharePoint 2010 development that we're ever going to do is kind of subject to an app pool spin up time like that. That's kind of going to slow us down, I think. Don't know if you know the trick that you could do in SharePoint 2007, which would speed this up, which was you could either set something in machine config to not check publisher evidence, that worked, or you could download some certificate list from Microsoft, which would mean that you've got the information locally, it doesn't try and go out to the internet, or you could do a registry hack, which would again stop that check. If you're not doing that on SharePoint 2007, by the way, I highly recommend it, because it does speed that kind of spin-up time it reduces it quite dramatically. Okay, so no change on our feature upgrade. If we search now for site scope features to upgrade, again, we find that successfully it's found our site feature. It does need upgrade. Currently it's at 1000. Makes sense. We'll upgrade that. Okay, that was successful. Do the web ones now. Okay, so those are our, how many have we got? 5. We're going to leave all the checkboxes checked because we want to upgrade them all. And I think here's where the VM froze yesterday, so we'll see if we get past that. Okay, so that seems to have worked. So it says that they all upgraded successfully. Now, if we go to our content type first, we see that we've got our activity description large field. And if we go to one of the list items, actually it was here that we froze yesterday, I think. That would really annoy me if that froze at exactly the same point. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so that worked. So when we look at our list item now, we just picked one out of one web. The description field has got bigger. It's actually our new field and our code is executed that copied the value. So happy days. So that's 2 iterations of feature upgrade. One with the pure XML, with the out-of-the-box elements that we've got, and one with code to do something that's a bit more complex. So that's kind of the demo that we looked at yesterday. Kind of rattled through that fairly quickly, I hope. Let's go back to the slides and look at some other stuff. Okay, so that's the vehicle then for rolling out changes to SharePoint features. That's what we've got in 2010. We had other techniques in 2007, like rerunning feature receivers, but We kind of talked about deficiencies to that approach. The thing to understanding how, what the changes are that you need to make, and we can build fairly complex SharePoint solutions with lots of different artifacts melded together in quite different ways. The key to understanding what you need to do if you get put in a position where you have to make changes to something that's live is understanding how SharePoint treats them. You can break it down into two categories. Provisioned artifacts. This is where SharePoint is provisioning something into the content database when you declare it in a feature and get that feature activated. We'll look at those first. And these are things where you have to use the API. Some stuff already went into the database. If you want to change it, the only supported way of doing it, really, is to write code using the API. So an example in 2007 was a content type. You could declare the XML for it. You could deploy it as a feature. Once that was in there, you couldn't go back to the XML and change it. You couldn't add new columns or anything like that. So you had to write API code. Obviously, in 2010, that's slightly different with the add content type field element. That's the kind of hole that one's trying to get you out of. But think about things like fields, list instances, content type bindings. These are all provisioned artifacts. Every time you use one of those, something is going into the content databases. You have to use API code to do that. So that's kind of the second approach that we looked at in feature upgrade. Now, these are what I think of as standard cases for provisioned artifacts. Other things that aren't so standard, content types we just discussed. So previously you had to use the API. Now we've got the other approach with add content type field. That's cool. That's helpful. Modules are slightly different. You provision something into the content database when you declare a module, but the upgrade kind of path depends on if it's customized, then you would need to upgrade the file on the file system. Typically, a solution upgrade will do that for you. That's fine. If you needed to change list item properties, I think that you need to write code to amend that list item. I don't think declaring something different in the module will take effect there. So if you need to change metadata for a file that's in a list somewhere, a document library, I'm pretty sure you'll need to write API code for that. If the file is customized, so it was a ghostable rather than ghostable in library, then you have to overwrite the file in the library. Now, I'm trying to think back, but I don't think that re-provisioning a module will overwrite that file. I don't think it will. So I think that you would have to use code to kind of drop in a new file into that library. It's kind of a rarer case. I think most of us as developers try and work with uncustomized files more than customized. But you see what I'm getting at here, that stuff that is provisioned, it's gone into the database, and really to make a change to one of those artifacts, you're going to need to use the API more often than not. The other category is declarative artifacts. So Microsoft are using these terms now. There's some new content on MSDN that uses these terms. These tables, these are my tables, and I kind of interpret their information and kind of add on some bits that I know. But it's interesting that we've got these terms used in two places now. We've got them used for whether we kind of writing something in XML and we called that declarative, and whether we're doing something in code, we called that programmatic or imperative or something like that. But they're also using them to categorize artifacts. So the other one to provisioned artifacts is declarative. And here, the way to upgrade it simply is, more often than not, to just overlay a file, to overwrite a file that's on the file system in the SharePoint root. Examples of things are things like delegate controls, custom actions, workflow templates. None of this stuff actually goes in the database. If you think about a custom action, say, you find that if you went to directly edit the file in the SharePoint root, as long as you recycle the app pool, your changes are taken effect immediately. And that's because they didn't go anywhere in the database. So all this stuff, it's just reading from the files that you've got in your SharePoint root when the app pool spins up. So making an update to them is just as simple as overwriting the file. And more often than not, we do that from updating it in our WSP, doing an upgrade solution and pushing that out. Some things which I think don't quite fit that standard case are list definitions. So they have files in the SharePoint root. And the main file there is schema.xml, which is quite a complex file. Now, you can make changes to that, and then new list instances that get created from the definition will take those changes. But there's certain changes there that I wouldn't make to a schema.xml. I wouldn't go around removing columns. If you try and do that, often you'll fail to create new list instances. So if I was adding new columns, then you can make changes to schema XML, push that out. Your new list instance that gets created then will have those changes. But it's kind of restricted in what you can do. You can't do everything, and that is a really kind of odd case in what you can and can't do. So tread carefully there. If you needed to do something that is one of those breaking changes, I think the solution is to do a new list definition and mark the old one as hidden. And then obviously your old instances are on the old definition. If you need to add columns and you're not using content type, say, you would need API code to change those existing instances. So it does get pretty complex, doesn't it? All these different artifacts, and it's a bit like artifacts that we use day in, day out in SharePoint, but they all have different upgrade characteristics. Final one is site definition. So again, they're just files on the file system in the SharePoint root, but we can't go back and modify them. You know, Microsoft say that it isn't supported to modify site def files once we've got sites based off them. So here, I think you need to try and base your development work around features. When you've got features and fairly lightweight site definitions, it's basically a case of stapling new features to those sites. So any further sites then get the new feature, and then you would have to activate either UI or via script to activate that on existing sites. Don't forget, though, that we've got the new approach of upgrading features. So if you did package this stuff in a feature that was attached to your site def initially, if you upgrade those features throughout the webs where they're in use, then that's your new upgraded functionality rolled out. One that kind of deserves a bit of a special case that deserves a bit of kind of focus is workflows. Workflows are particularly complex to upgrade. And this is really because if you've got running workflows, they are based on a certain definition, and because the workflow foundation in .NET, so the low-level stuff, that is effectively doing deserialization and serialization when it kind of hydrates the workflow back to sleep in the database. When it gets it out, it's going to do some deserialization and try and build the classes back up from XML that it put there. If you've changed your workflow classes, so this is code workflows, by the way, not SharePoint Designer workflows. If you've changed the code definition, the deserialization process is going to fail for those running workflow instances. So even something as simple as adding a private variable to the class, that will be used in serialization unless it's marked as non-serializable. So pretty complex to upgrade workflow definitions when you've got running workflows. I think the only way you can do it outside of saying to the business, hey, you guys need to finish all your workflows by the weekend because we're doing an upgrade. If you can do that, do it. You know, it's going to simplify your life quite a lot. When you can't, what you have to do is do a new workflow association onto a new version of the assembly, which has your new class, and then set the old workflow association to no new instances in SharePoint, and then deploy the new workflow association that's pointing to the new assembly, and that's going to pick up the new workflow instances. So a few things to manage there when you're upgrading running workflows. Notice that if we are doing a new assembly, what are we going to do there? Well, you could create a new assembly and give it a new name. More logical, perhaps, is actually to increment the version number of the existing assembly. So this is where we get into the assembly versioning debate again. And that is a prime case of where you do really need to do assembly versioning, despite the fact that even patterns and practices were telling you not to in 2007. Okay, so changes to the WSP framework then. So we looked at features, we've kind of talked about some schema changes there, we've talked about the upgrade framework. What's new in in solutions? First one is resource files. So this is kind of only really relevant if you're building international localized solutions, but there is something interesting about it. So you can do regex files for all your translation strings, and they can now go into the app global resources folder. Now, app global resources lives under your web root, not the SharePoint root. So typically it might be CI, netpub, www root, virtual directories, whatever. And basically by marking the file in Visual Studio, there's a drop down of the deployment type. You can say it's a global resource. It can be deployed there. Now think about that. This is the first time the WSP framework has ever deployed files outside of the SharePoint root. So it's now able to deploy files under CI/init pub www root. That's quite interesting. The only thing is, it only is for resources, and it only goes to app global resources. So it's kind of a bit of a kicker that Microsoft didn't expand this, and you could use WSPs then to deploy any file to anywhere in your web root. I think a lot of people have been asking that for a while, but they've only opened it up for resources. We now have solution dependencies. In the same way that we've got feature dependencies, we've now got solution dependencies, but not solution receivers, which is one of the things that we talked about yesterday. We had a question about solution receivers. So we've got dependencies, which we'll cover in a bit more detail in a minute, but one of the things I was really hoping for was receivers, so we'd have an event when a WSP is being retracted, or it's being added, or it's being deployed. And if we had a hook we could write code in, we could do lots of things. We could check to see if any other things were dependent on it. You know, we could do some logging, some auditing. Why did our solution break? Who retracted the WSPs? You know, we could do lots of things that would be very nice. Now, I think, did I mention this yesterday? If you go looking, you find in your ULS logs things that might indicate that solution receivers do exist. You'll find code that SharePoint is logging to say, looking for solution receiver details. That's just a tease. They cut it, basically. So it was in, and then at the last minute they told us, we cut that out. Couldn't make this release. So I'm sure it'll be in the next release, maybe in a service pack, but not at the moment, unfortunately. The other thing that is the big news with solutions is that they can now do assembly binding redirects. So we looked at that theory about 90% of the world's deployments kind of still being at version 1.0.0.0. If you were in the 10% that claimed to do proper versioning, I think you had to use this method. Now, what this method does, if you're not familiar with binding redirects, it's just a .NET thing. It's not specific to SharePoint, but what this allows you to do is when version X of an assembly is requested, perhaps because there's a reference to it, you're using it at runtime, you can say, don't use X, use version Y. You can't redirect from a different assembly name completely to another one. It's only for versions. But what this allows you to do is, instead of loading version 1.0.0.0, you can load version 2.0.0.0. And what this gets you around is the fact that in SharePoint, assembly version numbers are everywhere. They are in safe control entries, workflow definitions, web part definitions, master pages, ASPX pages, ASCX pages. The list goes on. That's why assembly versioning was so difficult in 2007. So this is big news. This is what enables us now to think about doing proper assembly versioning in SharePoint. Depends where you put the redirect. So you would have to put the redirect in the host process config file. So like owstimer.exe.config. Alternatively, machine.config. So where we used to do a lot of this stuff pre-SharePoint, and we used to work in we had a big enterprise deployment where we had about 150 assemblies, 50 SQL databases. It was a very big deployment. And we relied on .NET's capability to redirect assemblies. Oh. I think that might be, I don't know. I think those guys up there don't know either. No, they don't. I think let's carry on. Yeah, if we get chucked out, we'll get chucked out. Okay. Okay, so it's this thing in .NET that is making kind of big .NET scenarios possible. If we had a key assembly, like a data assembly, we would often find that 50 other projects referenced it. Now, when we incremented the version number there, what are you going to do? Check 50 projects out of source control to recompile them? It just isn't practical. So here's where we used assembly binding redirects in machine config, because we had lots of processes using them, and that's kind of what made it all possible. And it's the same in SharePoint now. It's this that allows us to do proper assembly versioning. Now let's think about shared assemblies for a moment, something that probably all of us have in our deployments. we've got solution dependencies, and they don't work quite like feature dependencies. So in the same way that you can activate a feature and it can activate the depended on feature, that's not going to work the same for solutions. So if you've got WSPA that depends on WSPB, if you deploy this one, it doesn't automatically push WSPB out to all your farms. You probably wouldn't want that. Depends what's in that WSP. The big thing to be aware of with these is that they only get checked at deployment time, not at retraction time. So it's still possible, if you've got some really important WSP, that's perhaps your data layer or something like that, you could still retract that, and if you've got 5 other WSPs that still depend on it, it doesn't matter, it'll still get retracted. So you can get things in a broken state. So that's something to be aware of, and that's maybe why solution receivers would have been a nice thing, because we could add more advanced logic to that process. But that's the deal with solution receivers. And the redirect thing. So I think we've covered that now. Got version numbers everywhere in SharePoint.
Control. The alarm was activated in error. There is not an emergency situation.
Okay.
The Centre apologises for any disruption caused. All staff stand down and return to normal duties.
That's quite okay, no problem. Okay, so these are the two things that are really key, I think, in the solution framework. Let's take a look at this assembly versioning in practice then. So thinking back to our original demo, we did some stuff with feature upgrade and we added some fields. You remember that this functionality has kind of a front end, if you like, which is here. So, okay, so we've added some fields and so on, but nothing's being displayed in the website. We've not changed anything on the front end of this functionality. What we're going to do now is kind of go to our data layer, find the query that is finding these list items, and we're going to change the query and add in those new columns. Because our data assembly is something key, it's very shared, it's got lots of other things depending on it, we're going to increment the version number and see how that plays out. Okay, so this time we are over in our adventureworks.data, and I know that there is a class called AW Data Manager. This has a method called fetch tourist activities, and it's good old camel. There isn't link in here, partly because it didn't really suit my example because of the classes that link would generate. I kind of just want this shared assembly for the kind of the versioning kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is change the view fields of this query to add in those new columns that we added earlier. Okay, so I'm adding in some extra placeholders, and what I'm going to do is do constants, field name. So what were those new fields? We added a free, that'll be the free activity one, and we added the activity type field, didn't we? So that would be field names dot, was it activity type. And what I'm also going to do is change the description one to the activity description large, so that we're pulling the value out of there. Okay, so that's kind of our code change done. What we're going to do now is increment the assembly version number. Okay, assembly version, so we're at 100. Talk about these at the end, but for now I'm just going to increment to 200. And we're going to deploy that. Actually, one thing I just want to do is, okay, so that's going to default, so let's change that to upgrade. Build the WSP, push it out. Okay, so let's do a poll. What's going to happen here? Is this going to work or not work? Hands up if you think it's going to work. Not many. Okay, so there's follow-up question. So everybody thinks it's going to not work. Why is it not going to work? What's going to happen? Anybody? Okay, right. So what's going to happen is we haven't done anything in terms of the version numbers. So we've got all our existing references to the assembly still at 100. So chances are we'll have something in web config, have safe control entries there for one thing. We'll have something in the master page probably. Anything that's in a page layout will still be pointing at 100. So what we would find is that we'll get a type load exception or something like that. Effectively, the site will go bang. Now, I spoke to quite a few people who knew that I was doing this topic, and we had some really interesting conversations about, yeah, we tried to do assembly version in 2007, but we just really couldn't get it to work. We ran into all sorts of problems, and problems with timer jobs, problems with lots of other bits and pieces. And, well, the answer is because, yeah, we've got these version numbers everywhere. This technique of using a binding redirect in 2007, it did work in 2007. Hardly anybody did it. And the reason was because, how do you get it in all of your web configs? Let's say you've got 6 web front ends in your farm. How, are you going to step outside the solution framework, edit them all manually? That's what you would have had to do. The only other option in 2007 was to try and write, so there you go, site goes bang. The only other option in 2007 was to try and write some SP web config modification code yourself. That was actually very tricky. More tricky than usual with SP web config modification, partly because of where it needs to appear in the file and a couple of other things, so hardly anybody did it. Okay, so this is how we deal with this problem. This is how we put in the binding redirect. We go to the package now. So this is package designer, not feature designer. This is the solution level designer. Again, no UI onto this stuff. We're down at editing the file itself. What I'm going to do is copy that from the Visual Studio generated stuff. And I'm going to edit the file myself, so my changes are going to be merged in. And what I'm going to do is open up this element, and now I can put binding redirects in here. Binding redirect, and there is an old version. So the old version was 100, we incremented it to 200. Notice there is no new version on here, and that's kind of because, well, it can infer that. It knows what assembly it's deploying, so it puts that in for us. And we try and deploy this, and this is an interesting thing. Let me zoom in on this. Error occurred in deployment step upgrade. The solution file basically does not appear to be a valid upgrade. Do you see why that's happening? What we've done here is we've changed something from global scope. We are now editing web configs. So it's now kind of web application scoped. So because we've now got something, a bit like if we add a control to a file to a WSP for the first time, it now needs to write to the web config with the safe control entry. Just an upgrade isn't good enough. What we need to do is actually a full retraction and redeploy. So that's one to look out for when you kind of change in scopes like that. So if we change Visual Studio to do the full deployment. Okay, that succeeded that time. Refresh the page. And basically, if we were in production there, because that went into the WSP has pushed out that binding redirect instruction to all of our web configs. Consider, though, the thing that Martin mentioned, that what if you are kind of using other things like timer jobs and other things that go to other processes? Binding redirect in a manifest.xml is only going to update web configs. That's all it's capable of. So there might be times when you choose to do something different, like put it in machine config, so all of the processes, whether it's for timer jobs, workflows, web process with W3, WP, so that it uses the binding redirect. Just consider that when it's going in web config, it's only affecting your web application, not other processes. That's a good question. Yeah, okay, I'm worried that it might only go to the default zone. I don't know, haven't tested it. Very good question, though. I'd love to know the answer. But going on history, I think it might only go to the default zone, which would be a kicker. I mean, I'd like to think, to be honest, that they might have kind of dealt with that properly and thought about it. But I don't know. Need to know the answer to that. Anyway, that's going to come back, and the site will then work. So I'm not sure we need to hang around for that, really. Okay, so back to the slides. So that's how you do assembly versioning. That's something that wasn't really easy to achieve in SharePoint. So let's think about some versioning strategies then. Question marks don't mean that I haven't finished off the title for this slide. It's more meant to indicate we've got 4 parts to a version number, both for features and assemblies. What should go into each of those numbers? Let's think about assembly versioning first. I think the main thing here is that you want to be able to trace back to what code went in what assembly. So, you can come up with lots of different versioning strategies and plans, and we're going to talk about a few, but the main thing is that you have different version numbers and that you are keeping track of what code went into what. If you don't have different version numbers, and we're all still at 100, what have you got that tells you what's in that version of that assembly in production? The answer is not a lot. When you don't have this stuff, all you've got is reflector, right? And what we end up doing sometimes, and I know you do this because I have to do it, and that's when you have to find out what code is in an assembly on production, is you get that assembly and you open it in reflector. That's not a good place to be. That's what version numbers get you past. So the main thing, I think, is to increment in some way, work out a versioning plan that works for you. I think it's very different if you are perhaps a product company, if you're a vendor, than if you're just a normal consultancy. These 4-part numbers break down into major, minor, build, and revision. The most common plan is what I've got there at the moment, so kind of highlighted in blue, and really you're using the change severity to work out which of the 4 parts to increment. So if you're doing something minor, like perhaps you're adding some logging to existing classes, often what you'll do is you'll increment the rightmost number. You're really just changing the build, you're changing the revision. If it's more serious, if you're kind of adding classes, often you'll increment the build number, which is the 3rd most one. If it's something breaking, let's say you are deleting a class or changing some members, you're changing something on the types, then more often than not, you'll increment the major or the minor versions. When you increment one of the leftmost versions, you always kind of reset the other numbers to 0, and that is kind of the most common plan for versioning assemblies. Let's think about some other alternatives, some things that you might not have thought of. If you're a product company, you might have a different strategy for shipping assemblies. So you might kind of do something different to non-shipping builds, things that are just going to the build server and the test team, and then when you push something out to the wider public, you use a different kind of version number. For products, the version number is often tied into marketing. The marketing department sometimes say in product companies, we can't use the same assembly version of last time. We've made loads of hype about this new thing. You've got to change the version number. And there's all sorts of things that play into this. Other things, you might want to incorporate your iteration number if you're doing Agile. You might want to incorporate your TFS change set number. So again, you've got stuff that allows you to trace back to, to make it easier to find out what went into what version. Or you might come up with something else. There are quite a lot of different varieties. You might have date time in there. That's what Microsoft do with their build numbers. They have kind of a compressed date time, which enables them to track their builds. You might come up with your own thing. So that's assemblies. Bear in mind that there is kind of 2 version numbers on an assembly. There is a file version, so you could use that to perhaps internally version things. .NET doesn't use that in terms of binding redirects or assembly loading. That's kind of a read-only field, if you like. Sorry, not read-only. It's not used in loading. You can put whatever you want in there and .NET won't care. So you've got kind of a second place where you can put alternate versioning if that suits. So that's assemblies. Let's think about features. So we've got a version number there now. Again, the main purpose is to identify what is where. With features, it's slightly different. This is where, let's say that you've got 1,000 site collections and 1,000 webs in each. You might not have the same feature version deployed everywhere. So it's the version number that's going to help you identify what functionality you've got deployed where. And I think really it's about using similar principles to assemblies. If I was adding some functionality to a feature that was new, then I would most likely increment one of the leftmost numbers. If I was just, say, so let's say I was changing the title in some list or some list definition, then something minor like that, I might only change one of the rightmost numbers. But I think it's a good principle to use the same guidelines that you use for assemblies. Now, don't try and keep them in sync. There will be times when you will increment a feature version number and not an assembly version number, or vice versa. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend trying to keep them in sync because they're different things. So, don't worry that at some point you're going to diverge. But I think with all this, incrementing version numbers on its own isn't the be-all and end-all. You do need to be tracking what is in each version. So whether it's just Excel or something like that, you need to be able to know kind of what was in version 1.4.5.1. But it's version numbers that are really the key to working this all out. Okay, so to wrap up, we now have a standardized framework for upgrading SharePoint apps. We've got XML that helps us do it, things like the shortcuts like add field to content type. We've got code that we can write in the new feature upgrading event. We should use the new capabilities, things like solution dependencies and WSP import, which we think could be a good shortcut to deriving feature XML. We've got to take advantage of these. They can make our lives easier. And then, in terms of kind of takeaways from this, I think that going forward, now is the time to version assemblies. Particularly for shared assemblies, if you've got shared libraries that you distribute to all your clients, that stuff absolutely should be versioned going forward. You've now got the tools to do it. As long as you understand kind of some of the principles, I think it's not too complex. So with assemblies, the key is assembly binding redirect, which we can now push out with WSPs. And with features, it's about leveraging the feature upgrade framework. So a few extra things to think about if you're not used to versioning stuff. But I think especially for non-trivial apps, big benefits. Okay, so thank you for your time. Any questions? Yep.
Take the example of workflow when you're buying increment version. Is there any support for deploying side-by-side version changes so you can leave version 1 in but also deploy version 2?
Of the assembly? Absolutely. That's what the GAC is for. The GAC is for allowing side-by-side execution of multiple assemblies.
But for example, in WSP that you rolled out earlier, if you change the assembly number of version 2, it blacks in version 1.
It won't black the assembly, if that's what you mean. So if I've changed the version number of the assembly, it will leave version 1000 there. It's just also deploying a new version, which is 2000. Because all the references are still out. Oh, let's think about that. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, you're right. It's the fact that we did a retract, I guess, which is going to be an issue in dev, at least, because we need to do a retract when we change scope like that. So I guess the conclusion to that is that we have to always do an upgrade, and then I think what you have to do is you have to do a full retraction and redeploy in dev, and you accept that it will blat out the 100 assembly. For all your other environments, like tests, staging, production, what you're going to do is get hold of the WSP somehow. Don't forget, you could just run package instead of deploy, and then you run upgrade for all your other environments, and that will preserve the original assembly. Good discussion. Yeah, that's some good thoughts. Say that again.
Other than when you're changing the scope of the WSP, putting in your assembly redirect, you were saying before you have to actually retract.
But that's what we're saying. Maybe in dev the answer is instead of using deploy, where it is going to take away the old assembly, just do package and put the use something separate, PowerShell command to deploy the WSP, to upgrade it. So, you see what I mean? Instead, work around Visual Studio trying to say, I can't deploy that. I think that would work. As in publisher policy files? You can. There is no support for kind of redirects via publisher policy in the solution framework, no. It's only through binary redirects in web config. So if you are a product vendor or somebody that's using publisher policy instead, then yeah, you would have to do it kind of the way that you always did it, but there's no support in the WSP framework to get that publisher assembly into the GAC. Yeah. I think what they've done here is they've targeted the most common case, right? And I think certainly for non-product oriented companies, that's probably the way that we'd go about it. But what you could do is if you can generate that publisher assembly, you can add it into the WSP So all the assemblies in your WSP don't have to be output from projects in your solution. You can say, I want to package up another assembly in here, and there's a dialog that you can go to which says, add assembly, you browse to it off the file system, and that would push it out to the WSPs. So I guess that's the route for doing that. Questions? Yep.
For workflows, you were talking about you create one workflows and old versions for old workflows that are still running. But if you use the assembly redirect, won't that also redirect into the new version?
Yeah, that's a case where you can't use an assembly redirect. But in fact, you don't want an assembly redirect there. You want side by side of the assembly version, so you want them both in the GAC, but that's where you don't want a redirect. So that's why instead of the redirect, what you have is the new SP workflow association that is pointing to version 2.0.0.0. That's kind of your level of redirect. So what that logically makes you conclude is that your workflow has to be in a separate assembly to kind of other stuff that you might want a redirect for. Don't put workflows in the same assembly as controls, say, or data layer code. They've got to be in a separate assembly because you're going to treat those in different ways. So you would be stuck if you had some things in the same assembly that you needed a redirect for, but if you've got that workflow in a separate assembly, you're good. Yep. Yeah. Okay, that's a great question. We talked about that yesterday. So the case is, let's say that you've incrementally upgraded a feature several times. You're kind of at a stage where you're at version 4.0.0. What happens if you activate that feature in that state onto a brand new web that has never had it before? You're kind of not going through the upgrade steps effectively. Now, here's what you see, okay? You see that all the declarative stuff gets provisioned okay, right? And the reason for this is when I add new element manifests and I use apply element manifest to do it, what it's also doing, and this is a Visual Studio thing, is it's putting in a good old kind of elements manifest into the feature XML file. So I see 2 references in feature XML to that elements file. And it's a bit like, one is what you would always do if you're just adding an elements file to a feature, and one is within apply element manifest. So because it was in the old-fashioned way as well, when you activate it for the first time, it gets caught by that. Apply elements manifest is just being ignored because that's to do with feature upgrade. But because it also got put in as a reference in the old-fashioned way, if you like, declarative stuff will work. Code stuff in feature upgrade, that will not have executed. So what we discussed yesterday is maybe what you need to think about there is designing your features so that the code that is running upgrade maybe is also called from a feature activation receiver. Now, I think it's not going to be as straightforward as that. You're kind of getting into state, basically. And your code might be expecting objects to be in a certain state, have certain properties, have certain lists to have certain fields, and so on. So you're going to have to plan ahead. You're going to have to know kind of what state you're starting out with. But bear in mind that that's how upgrade works. You know, that stuff is going to run an upgrade. Declarative stuff will work when you activate something for the first time, but the code won't ever have worked. So unless you've made plans to get that code run some other way, perhaps in the feature receiver, or perhaps with something outside of that, console app, PowerShell, something like that, it won't be called. So there is a bit of planning to do in feature design. I haven't seen anything ever written down on this yet. This is kind of, this is where we're at with this. And I haven't seen anybody talk about it yet either. That's just from sort of testing that I've done. Okay, thanks for your time, everybody. Thank you.